Hi, my name is Jonathan, and I'd like to read to you a poem by Rumi. Rumi is my all-time favorite poet. I love this guy because I myself am a mystic, and Rumi was this 12th century, 12th century Sufi poet who lived in the Ottoman Empire, and he was Persian, and he practiced Sufism, which is the mystical branch of Islam, which means a lot of his poetry deals with union with God. And when I read Rumi, I don't just read his poetry. Like, I experience Rumi when I read Rumi. Like, I experience mysticism when I read Rumi. Like, it's one of the reasons why I love Rumi. And like a lot of mystics, Rumi uses sex as a metaphor for a mystical union with God. And this poem, it's one of my favorite poems by Rumi, called Bread Making. It references sex as a metaphor for union with God. And, like, it's more than just a symbol. Sex is more than just a metaphor for union with God. Like, our sexual energies within us is the greatest force within us we have for achieving perfect mystical union with God. Like, sex is just, it's not just lust. Okay, like, I would say that the hornier that you are, the more potential you have for achieving perfect, profound mystical union with God. Like, if you are a mystic like myself, I would encourage you to redirect your sexual energies towards God instead of wasting it on lust. Like, I myself, I'm a very, very horny person. I have all this built up sexual energy within me. I would say higher than the normal person. But like, I would say, like I said, the more hornier you are, the more potential you have for achieving a profound union with God. So redirect your sexual energies. Instead of wasting it on lust, redirect it towards union with God. And I'm not saying to reject sex at all. I'm not saying don't have sex. But I'm saying that lust, like, your sexual energies aren't exclusively towards lust. You can use your sexual energies towards having a relationship with God, towards union with God. So that's part of being a mystic, is just using your sexual energies towards union with God. So I wanted to reference some of the symbolism and metaphors within this poem before I read it to you. Like, there's a metaphor for wine within the poem, and wine is a metaphor for spirit, for spiritual things. And also, I like in the poem that they contrast legalism versus mysticism. Two approaches towards having a relationship with God, two approaches towards God. Legalism, where it's a relationship with God that involves more rules and structure. And mysticism, which involves more anarchy in a relationship with God, and just reveling in emotions, reveling in passion. And within the poem references that only mysticism, only reveling in emotion and passion achieves perfect union with God, and not legalism. And so that's what I like about the poem. And I also like in the poem referencing sexual symbolism, as it talks about, references fellatio. Fellatio is a metaphor for the opening the door to union with God. Just like foreplay and sex. Giving someone a blowjob is just opening the door towards sex, and it's the same with union with God. It's like I'll read that in a second. But like, something else I like about the poem is it's called bread making, because bread making, the making of bread, is both a simultaneous metaphor for the poem for sex and for union with God. Because making bread involves a lot of pain to the dough. A lot of kneading and just being rough with the bread. And that's why it's called bread making. So it's the same with our relationship with God, is that surrendering to pain in our lives, it just opens the door to having a perfect union with God. So that's why it's called bread making. That's what I like about the poem. Also in the poem, it talks about passionate fighting as a metaphor for our relationship with God. Like fighting, like in sex. Like when two people are fucking, it looks like they're wrestling with each other, and it's like they're not fighting with each other. They are in perfect union with each other, just like wrestling out of passion, out of agreement with each other. And that's just that symbolism in sex of wrestling with each other is just what union with God looks like. So that reference is in the poem. And my favorite line in the poem is, quote unquote, "The way you make love is the way God will be with you." And I just love that. Okay, sorry I rambled too much, so I will read the poem now. I love this poem by Rumi. There was a feast. The king was heartily in his cups. He saw a learned scholar walking by. "Bring him in, and give him some of this fine wine." Servants rushed out and brought the man to the king's table, but he was not receptive. "I had rather drink poison. I have never tasted wine and never will. Take it away from me." He kept on with his loud refusals, disturbing the atmosphere of the feast. This is how it sometimes is at God's table. Someone who has heard about ecstatic love, but never tasted it, disrupts the banquet. If there were a secret passage from his ear to his throat, everything in him would change. Initiation would occur. As it is, he's all fire and no light, all husk and no kernel. The king gave orders. "Cupbearer, do what you must." This is how your invisible guide acts, the chess champion across from you that always wins. He cuffed the scholar's head and said, "Taste." And again, the cup was drained, and the intellectual started singing and telling ridiculous jokes. He joined the garden, snapping his fingers and swaying. Soon, of course, he had to pee. He went out, and there, near the latrine, was a beautiful woman, one of the king's harem. His mouth hung open. He wanted her. Right then he wanted her. And she was not unwilling. They fell to on the ground. You've seen a baker rolling dough. He kneads it gently at first, then more roughly. He pounds it on the board. It softly groans under his palms. Now he spreads it out and rolls it flat. Then he bunches it and rolls it all the way out again, thin. Now he adds water and mixes it well. Now salt, and a little more salt. Now he shapes it delicately to its final shape, and slides it into the oven, which is already hot. You remember bread making. This is how your desire tangles with the desired one. And it's not just a metaphor for a man and woman making love. Warriors in battle do this too. A great mutual embrace is always happening between the eternal and what dies, between essence and accident. The sport has different rules in every case, but it's basically the same. And remember, the way you make love is the way God will be with you. So these two were lost in their sexual trance. They did not care anymore about feasting or wine. Their eyes were closed like perfectly matching calligraphy lines. The king went looking for the scholar, and when he saw them there coupled, commented, "Well, as it is said, a good king must serve his subjects from his own table. There is joy, a wine-like freedom that dissolves the mind and restores the spirit, and there is manly fortitude like the king's, a reasonableness that accepts the bewildered lostness. But meditate now on steadfastness and clarity, and let those be the wings that lift and soar through the celestial spheres. That's the end of the poem, and I wanted to again read my last, my favorite line in the poem. The way you make love is the way God will be with you. So, that's by Rumi. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.